Most monsters in video games only exist to be slaughtered and then later forgotten. They act as simple obstacles that block your path and provide a brief challenge before you move on. But the entities inhabiting Dark Souls are completely different. They are rarely a natural product of the world. Instead, they are the visible aftermath of tragic fates, unethical experimentation, and civilizations that tried to survive decay by rewriting the human body itself. Look at the parasitic wall hugger. It's a bloated, pulsing mass of flesh permanently fused to the stone walls of Blight Town. In the game's internal code, this creature is actually named Prince Izalith. This single detail suggests he was once royalty, or perhaps even a son of the Witch of Izalith, before the Chaos Flame deformed him. This is a profound horror in this transformation. The prince of an ancient, powerful dynasty has been reduced to a static mass of sludge that cannot even move on its own. He simply clings to the wooden rafters, staring out over the toxic swamp below. Or look at the Dark Wraiths. Before they became the terrors of the ruins, they were the elite proud knights of Londo, sworn to protect a vast and thriving civilization. Yet, tragedy claims everything in Lordran, and these knights were no exception. The primordial serpent, Kath, seduced their kings with the forbidden art of life drain. Driven by greed, the knights turned on their own people, hunting their own citizens to harvest their souls. Now, their flesh has completely withered away inside armor shaped like human bones, leaving them trapped forever in the flooded dark. These examples are just a small sample of the creatures in Lordran that truly send shivers down my spine. To comprehend these terrifying designs, we cannot just look at them as monsters to fight. We must analyze their visual pathology. We will investigate the harsh environments that shaped them, interrogate their hidden item descriptions, and piece together the soul of their design to uncover the true horror hidden under their skin. The original Japanese name for the undead burg translates directly to the city of the immortals under the walls. It's a massive fortified settlement split into upper and lower tiers. The entire area is cluttered with makeshift wooden barricades, defensive spikes, and overturned carts. The layout mimics historical plague quarantine cities such as 17th century Edinburgh, where infected citizens were walled off from the rest of the world and left to rot in isolation. But here, the most tragic of all the enemies in Dark Souls lays waste. When you first step into the sunless alleys of the undead burg, the creatures that rise from the ground look completely ordinary. They are thin, grey human shapes covered in rotting rags. They carry broken pieces of iron, old wooden shields, or simple bows. If you play almost any other video game, you will immediately think these figures are just basic enemies. They look like simple starter monsters designed to teach you how to swing your sword before you move on to the bigger challenges and forget about them completely. Most casual players just look at them and think they are standard zombies. But this simple view completely misses the deep horror of this world. A typical zombie is just a dead body brought back to life by a disease or strange magic. The Hollow is something far more disturbing. It is a human being who has been stripped down to absolutely nothing. Every single layer of who they were, their identity, their memories, their pride, and their soul, has been completely burned away. To understand how a Hollow happens, we have to look at what they lose. A normal human being starts out in a healthy state. They have a working mind, a soul, and their own humanity. This balance keeps them alive and sane. But everything changes when they receive the dark side. The dark sign acts as a constant drain on the body. It slowly pulls the soul, the mind, and the humanity out of the human vessel to use them as fuel for the first flame. When a person goes through this drain, they enter the state of hollowing. This is where they lose their intelligence and their memories. Because their identity is completely gone, the mind cannot think anymore. Instead, it falls into a simple loop where the body just repeats old habits. In the final stage, the mind dies completely, The person becomes a mad hollow. At this point, the body can only do two things. It either sits completely still in a state of silence, or it attacks anything that comes near it with sudden, unthinking violence. When you look at a hollow, you are looking into a tragic mirror. They show us the exact end that waits for every single person in this world, because the rulers chose to break the natural cycle of life and death. They do not hunt you because they want to eat your flesh. They attack you because you are still whole. Your body is full of warm souls and intact humanity. To an empty, frozen hollow, your presence causes a strange, painful friction. Why do these creatures attack with such wild, desperate rage? Most Western horror stories tell us that monsters are driven by physical hunger, like the need to eat brains or drink blood. Dark Souls changes this into a story about mental and spiritual starvation. When a human gets a dark side, their internal spark, that is their humanity, is turned into raw coal to feed the fading fire of the gods. As they die over and over again, this fuel is stolen from them, leaving a massive cold void inside their chest. The hollow becomes a literal hungry ghost. They chase after souls because souls are the only source of life left in the world. They think that accumulating souls will quiet the empty vacuum inside them. We see this sad process happen to regular characters outside of Lordran, like the armor merchant Marlin. He moves to a new land and makes a massive fortune in souls, but as he gets rich, his mind fades. The hollow hunts simply because it is empty. They are driven by an old automated instinct to fill a hole that can never be filled again. This deep inner starvation shows up in two ways: absolute stillness or sudden explosive rage. If you explore the Undead Burg carefully, you will find many hollows that are completely peaceful. They do not move when you walk up to them. They sit in dark corners, stare blankly at stone walls, or lean over railings. They are completely unresponsive. Their willpower has dropped so low that their brain refuses to tell their muscles to move. Think about the hollows that carry torches in the lower streets or the deep cells of the asylum. Mechanically, these are some of the most dangerous enemies you can fight early in the game. They can hit you with a fast flailing 4-hit combo that breaks through your shield and inflicts massive fire damage. If you watch that specific attack animation, you can see it's not a well-calculated hit. Rather, the hollow attacks with a wild frenzy. The hollow is not using the torch as a real weapon. A torch is an object of domestic comfort, something meant to light a dark room or warm a house. The creature is holding it with a hand that no longer understands what fire is. They swing the flame with a terrifying erratic speed because the sudden heat and bright light provide a brief flash of stimulation to a nervous system that has gone completely dark. When these creatures carry swords and crossbows, they are not using real military strategies. They are operating on pure, hardened muscle memory. A hollow soldier stands on top of a wall and fires a crossbow bolt because its body spent 300 years standing on that exact same spot doing that exact same task. The mind that understood the political reasons for the war is dead. The brain that knew who the enemy was has vanished. All that remains is a machine running a permanent loop of old habits. The most terrifying hollows are not the ones that attack you with broken swords. The most horrifying ones are the creatures that refuse to fight you at all. They press their thin fingers into their temples, grabbing their own skulls with a desperate crushing force. Then, they violently shake their heads from side to side while making low muffled groans and sudden, sharp screams. This specific animation tells so much about the state they are in. It completely destroys the idea that hollowing is a peaceful, gentle slide into forgetfulness. That violent head shaking shows us a mind that is actively executing itself. It is a live record of the last piece of human awareness being ripped away by the dark side. The creature can feel its own self dissolving in real time. It clutches its head because it is physically trying to hold its memories together before they leak out into the void. It screams because it is still conscious enough to realize that it is losing the ability to think. Their soul is being drained away, and their memories of names, faces, and homes are turning to ash. This brings us to a massive contradiction in the history of the world: the existence of the Northern Undead Asylum. The items tell us that this giant stone fortress was built in the freezing barren mountains of the far north for one reason. It was made to be a massive prison where the undead are rounded up, corralled like cattle, and locked away forever to wait for the literal end of the world. Why would the rulers of the world, the Grand Golden City of Anor Londo, and its human church, the Way of White, spend a massive amount of money, soldiers, and stone to build a high-security prison for a population of harmless, shriveled corpses? You do not build a giant fortress across a frozen wasteland to contain sheep. You build it because you are absolutely terrified of what those sheep mean. The asylum was not built to protect living humans from the physical violence of the undead. It was built to hide the evidence of a massive crime. The gods did not fear the Hollow's broken swords. They feared the story that their bodies told. Every single human who loses their mind and turns into a grey, hairless shell is physical proof that the Age of Fire is an unsustainable lie. If the regular citizens of the human kingdoms saw the true size of the hollowing outbreak, the entire religious power of the church would fall apart in a single day. The asylum is a tool for state-sponsored hiding. Its goal is to take the natural state of humanity and treat it like an administrative mistake, a disease that must be locked away in the frozen dark so that the golden illusion of the gods' cities can look healthy for a few more centuries. It works exactly like the historical insane asylums or old plague colonies, where the broken, the poor, and the dying were systematically removed from public sight. They were hidden away to maintain the fiction of a clean, perfect, and divinely ordained world. To fully understand this horror, we must look at the biggest lie in the Dark Souls universe: the idea that the undead curse is a natural plague-like sickness that randomly appeared on its own as the fire began to fade. The undead curse is not an accident of nature. It is an intentional system built for spiritual extraction. It was designed by Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, and carried out on a massive scale by his uncle, Allfather Lloyd, using the power of the Way of White Church. Look at the exact words hidden in these item descriptions. The text never says the undead appeared naturally. Instead, it uses passive industrial words. The Boulder Helm notes that the entire human kingdoms fell after a great many undead were spawned. The Sewer Chamber Key explicitly asks, if citizens were turned undead as a punishment for greed, would they change their ways? You cannot use the words were turned or were spawned to talk about a natural biological flu. These are verbs that describe production, manufacturing, and deliberate choices. This entire reality is shown clearly in the very first image of the game's opening video. The development team under Hidetaka Miyazaki spent months refilming this exact sequence over and over again because they wanted to get the ritualistic feeling exactly right. We see a church maiden kneeling over a dead human soldier in a quiet, abandoned graveyard. The maiden reaches her hands into the empty air and gently catches a stray spark of the fire. Then, she guides her hands down toward the skin of the dead body. The exact moment her fingers touch the cold flesh, a bright, glowing ring of fire burns itself into the skin. This mark is the dark sign. The process of the curse follows a deliberate design. When the first flame begins to fade, Gwyn and Lloyd construct the dark sign ring. Way of White clerics take this power out into the world and perform the ritual over human bodies. This leaves humans branded with the curse, which allows their native humanity to be siphoned away like coal. The ritual is the secret heart of the church's massive hypocrisy. The Way of White publicly leads grand undead hunts. They send heavily armored knights and paladins out into the world to chase down, capture, and lock up the hollowed population under the banner of holiness and safety. Yet, the church itself is the exact entity that is producing the monsters in the first place. The dark sign is an artificial ring of fire branded directly into the human body. It acts as a permanent spiritual trap. Humans naturally possess pieces of the dark soul, which is called humanity. This power is cold, permanent, and grows on its own. If the world was left alone as the first flame faded, humanity would naturally rise, bringing about the Age of Dark, which is the natural age of man. To stop this from happening, Gwyn bound the power of the dark to a burning ring of fire. The dark sign is a permanent siphon that takes the internal soul of a human and turns it into heat to feed the fading bonfires of the gods. When a human dies, they do not get to rest in the peace of the grave. The dark sign catches their soul, ignites their internal humanity like wood in a fireplace, and forces their body back into the physical world through the bonfire network. The common hollow patrolling the wooden barricades of the undead burg, waving its torch and screaming in madness, is the final product of this system. Their memories are completely gone. Their skin has been dried out like leather by the heat, and their minds have been broken by the sheer trauma of being forcibly dragged back from the dead over and over again. Beyond the narrow alleys of the undead burg, blocking the path into the parish church sits the Fanged Boar. It is a massive, aggressive beast completely covered in heavy iron plates. Mechanically, it is an imposing mini-boss designed to force you to use the environment, fire, or clever positioning to survive. But if you look past its health bar, the physical design of the Fanged Boar reveals a story of extreme cruelty. The heavy steel plates are not a loose harness that can be unbuckled or taken off when the battle is over. The armor is bolted directly into the boar's living flesh and bone. If you look at the creature in the undead parish, you can see its organic tail hanging out from the gap in the rear plating. This gap exposes the raw skin of the actual boar hiding beneath the iron shell. The plates spin its ears flat against its skull and completely block its ability to turn its neck. The design direction mirrors the darkest parts of real-world military history, where humans weaponized nature by turning animals into tools of war. In ancient times, armies used war pigs to disrupt enemy formations. Because the iron plates lock its head into a forward position and block its peripheral vision, the boar cannot see anything unless, of course, it is directly in front of its tusks. This sensory deprivation explains why the creature is so incredibly hostile. It charges at you the moment it catches sight of you, because violence is the only response its brain can formulate. It is a pain-driven weapon. When it hears a noise or sees movement, its only option is to run forward blindly at full speed, slamming its massive weight into the stone walls because it cannot turn its head to see an exit. The true horror becomes even clearer when you look at the item description for the Fanged Boar helm, which the creature occasionally drops upon death. Severed head of the fully armored Fanged Boar, taken by the one who killed it as proof of his victory. Just as the gods once did with the head of the ancient dragon, can be worn on the head as a surprisingly sound piece of protective gear. The religious reverence for life is completely gone, replaced by the desire to dominate nature. The knights saw a wild beast, ruined its biology with iron bolts to create a defensive tool, and then celebrated its death by wearing its face as a hat. On the grand pathway leading to the sunlit terraces of Anor Londo into the cold archives of Seath the Scaleless, you run into two more Fanged Boars. These variants are significantly larger, carry far more health, and deal much more damage. But the most terrifying change is their armor. The gap in the rear that existed on the parish boar is completely gone. These archive boars are fully encased in seamless, impenetrable iron from the snout down to their tails. The early parish variant has open rear plating that leaves its organic tail exposed. But in the advanced archive variant, The creators upgraded the design to total enclosure, leaving zero room for a backstab and hiding the tail completely. In the undead parish, you can exploit the architect's careless mistake by slipping behind the beast and attacking its exposed flesh. But at the gates of the Duke's archives, the design has been perfected. No raw skin and no organic vulnerability. The creature cannot be backstabbed because there is no human way to reach the flesh inside. They have been completely sealed within their metal hulls, transformed into automated gargoyles of meat and steel. They show us what happens when the unethical experimentation of Seath takes a human military idea and refines it. The living animal is entirely erased. The depths are Lordran's subterranean cloak, a wet, dark labyrinth of tight brickwork overflowing sewage, and a damp place where butchers chop meat. This area mirrors the historical horror of London's Victorian sewers and the famous Great Stink of 1858. It is a space that is defined entirely by filth, absolute darkness, and the constant echoing sound of dripping water, creating a sense of isolation and contamination. When you descend from the lower streets of the burg into the flooded brick corridors of the depths, the first major hazard you encounter is the undead rat. In our regular world, humans have an ancient built-in fear of rats. This fear is not necessarily because a single rat is a massive apex predator, but because they are symbols of an unclean home. They enter our private spaces, eat our leftover food, and contaminate the surfaces we touch. We associate them with deadly historical plagues and a total lack of human sanitation. From Software took this domestic terror and made it significantly more disgusting. The undead rats in the depths come in multiple sizes. The standard variants are the size of a hunting dog, while the larger variants grow to the size of a horse. Mechanically, they are fast, aggressive pack hunters. They can attack in rapid succession, trapping you in a continuous stagger that bypasses your shield and builds up a potent type of poison that drains 9 damage per second. But their physical details are where the true grossness lies. When you look at the physical features of these creatures, the most unsettling part is their mutilated skin. Large portions of their bodies have absolutely no fur. Instead, these hairless patches expose raw, wet pink flesh that glistens in the damp dark of the sewers. This skin does not look like it was born this way. It looks like the rats have been attacked and eaten by other monsters from the outside, leaving behind deep, horrific wounds that partially healed into gross, thick scar tissue over several centuries. Their eyes are equally terrifying because they have no iris. The eyeballs are a solid milky white or dread grey color, showing that the rats are completely infected by the curse and the rot of the sewage. Their breathing pattern is incredibly rapid. If you stand still and watch a rat from a distance, it breathes with an unnatural speed. This constant twitching suggests that their internal respiratory systems are completely ruined. Their lungs are likely full of toxic swamp gas and liquid filth, forcing the animal to breathe rapidly as compensation. Their teeth are long, crooked, and colored a deep sickly yellow. Many of these front incisors are visibly broken and worn down to the root, proving that these animals have been aggressively gnawing on hard stone walls, rusted iron gates, and old human bones for hundreds of years. The most important lore detail regarding these monsters is their item drops. The small and large rats are heavily targeted by players early in the game because they are the most reliable source of farming humanity items. The rats are not naturally human, nor are they slowly evolving into humans over time. They drop humanity because they are prolific people eaters. They have spent centuries feeding on the raw carcasses of the undead thrown down from the berg. Humanity is a dense, cold, and eternally lasting substance. It is a fragment of the dark soul. Because it is a cosmic force, it cannot be broken down by animal stomach acid or liquid sewage. When a rat eats a human corpse, its body digests the meat and muscles, but the black sprite of humanity resists the digestive process completely. The humanity item sits inside the rat's stomach. trapped within the dark cavities of their bodies. If the common dog-sized variants are not enough to cause discomfort, the midway point of the sewers house the ultimate amplification of these species, the giant undead rat. This creature is a massive non-respawning mini-boss that grows to the size of a horse or a hippo, completely dominating the sewers. Its design takes every symptom of the smaller rats and expands it into a monstrous scale. Its face is a notebook of open sores and hairless scarred tissue. You can reach this giant monster by dropping down a hidden waste chute located directly behind the butcher's meat chopping table. This structural link explains why this specific rat grew so incredibly massive compared to its kin. It sat directly at the mouth of the primary food pipeline, swallowing the fresh meat chopped by the butcher. Deep within the flooded tunnels of the depths, guarding the way to the ring of the evil eye, lives the basilisk. These scrawny, slender lizards are widely feared by anyone who explores the sewers. Mechanically, they are incredibly fragile. They have very low health pools and zero poise, meaning almost any regular weapon strike or basic arrow will instantly stagger them and interrupt their movements. But their physical design is based around a massive biological deception. When you first look at the basilisk, your eyes are immediately drawn to two enormous orange bulbous shapes that protrude from the top of its head. These shapes look exactly like giant hyperextended googly eyes. This appearance is a complete lie. The giant orange spheres are false decoy eyes. If you look closely at the mouth line of the creature, you will find its actual functioning eyes, two tiny beads positioned directly above the corners of its mouth. This decoy design is a highly effective survival strategy used by real-world animals like the hawk moth or certain species of frogs. In nature, animals grow large fake eyes on their bodies to trick predators into thinking that they are much larger, more poisonous, or more intimidating than they actually are. In Dark Souls, the deception functions perfectly against the player's psychology. The giant false eyes completely steal your attention in the dark, making the creature look goofy and monstrous, while hiding the small, real face that is actively moving to kill you. Because of these massive false eyes, a specific lore myth has spread among the travelers of Lordran. In classic real-world mythology, a basilisk is a legendary reptile that can kill a human instantly with a single glance from its eyes. Within the world of Dark Souls, many regular undead believe the monster works exactly like the old legend. They think the beast kills you by making direct eye contact, focusing entirely on the giant orange globes on its head. But this is a complete misunderstanding of the creature. The basilisk's gaze does not possess any magical power. The great threat comes from a massive patterned throat sac located directly under its chin. When a basilisk spots you, it scrambles into position and expands this throat airbag, exhaling a thick cloud of grey mist into the air. This mist is a concentrated curse. The basilisk has no physical attacks in the depths. It cannot bite you, scratch you, or kick you. It relies entirely on this airborne fog to overwhelm your system. If you stand inside the cloud for even a few seconds, your curse meter will fill up completely, causing immediate painful death. The myth of the deadly gaze exists because the environment is so dark and full of sewer gases that victims never notice the grey fog until it's already suffocating them, leaving them to die while staring blankly into the giant fake eyes of the lizard. When the cursed mist takes hold of your character, you do not experience a standard death animation where your body falls into the ground. Instead, the curse attacks you from the inside, triggering an immediate violent crystallization process. Your skin turns grey, your joints freeze up, and your entire body breaks out into sharp, jagged stones until you are transformed into a permanent frozen statue of solid rock. The true horror of this curse is that it remains active even after you respawn at a bonfire. In the original version of the game, getting cursed instantly cuts your maximum health bar directly in half, and this penalty sticks with you through death until you can find a rare purging stone to break the stone alignment. The physical properties of the basilisk are so stable that the creature manages to survive through multiple cosmic games and timelines without ever changing its core form. This long-term consistency suggests a terrifying idea. The basilisks represents a perfect unyielding form of parasitic life. While human kingdoms rise, build massive stone palaces, and fall into complete ruin, the basilisks remain completely untouched by the changes of the upper world. They are completely deaf, meaning they cannot hear your footsteps or your armor clanging. They live a totally silent, isolated existence in the deepest, dampest corners of the earth, like the Great Hollow and the Lake of Rot. They are immune to the extreme environmental hazards that destroy other species, including the toxic sludge of Blight Town and the radioactive scarlet rot of the Outer Gods. They do not need to adapt or evolve because the world will always produce sewage, death, and forgotten corners for them to inhabit. They are the permanent occupants of the decay. Wherever there is the dark and the rot, there are these grotesque creatures. The final biological horror waiting in the flooded brick corridors of the depths of the slime. These amorphous gelatinous mounds crawl through the damp sewer tunnels, completely blending into the dark stone. Mechanically, they are designed as a severe environmental trap. They possess an incredible physical defense stat, which means that conventional swords, axes, and spears deal almost zero damage to them, causing your weapon to strike their bodies with a dull, ineffective thud. Their primary hunting tactic relies entirely on the player's lack of spatial awareness. They stick to the high ceilings of the corridors, waiting completely motionless directly above the main pathways. When you walk underneath them, they release their grip and drop straight down onto your character's head. If this falling grab attack connects, the slime completely engulfs your upper body, trapping you in a multi-hit suffocating animation that inflicts massive physical damage. It turns the very architecture of the sewer from a simple stone corridor into a living mouth that drops down to chew on your flesh from above. When you observe a slime after it has dropped to the wet floor, its physical anatomy reveals a completely alien biology. These entities are not made of natural mud or simple grease. Their bodies consist of a dense gelatinous mass that moves by sliding its weight across the brickwork. The game notes that their blood is a thick, bluish-green fluid, which is identical to the blood of real-world mollusks like octopuses, snails, and deep-sea squids. This blue-green color comes from hemocyanin, a copper-based protein used to transport oxygen in animals that live in freezing, oxygen-deprived or high-pressure marine environments. Protruding from the top of their soft, shifting bodies are multiple sharp, rusted iron spikes. These metal spikes are not weapons they found or picked up. They are embedded directly into the slime's body. This detail shows us that the slime acts as a living garbage filter for the city above. As they slide along the stone floors and ceilings, they swallow the broken nails, discarded iron bars, and rusted armor fragments that wash down from the undead berg. Instead of passing this metal waste, their dense bodies absorb it, forcing the sharp iron spikes out through their skin to create a protective defensive shell. Just like the giant leeches in the swamp below, the slimes in the depths are heavily farmed by hollow warriors because of their specific loot tables. They carry a steady 2% chance to drop a large titanite shard or a green titanite shard. The slimes are completely mindless organisms devoid of any soul, intellect, or memory. They do not understand the sacred nature of titanite, which was originally used by the ancient gods to build their divine armaments. They possess this material simply because they are the lowest vacuum cleaners of the ecosystem. The microscopic dust and broken flakes of titanite from the blacksmith stations above wash into the sewer lines, settling in the thick grease of the drains. The slimes swallow this metal residue as they graze on the filth of the walls. Because their copper-based systems cannot digest the dense divine ore, the titanite pools inside their core, compressing over centuries until it forms solid, reusable shards. While conventional steel blades bounce off their thick gelatinous hide without doing any real harm, they are completely defenseless against the element of fire. Striking a slime with a basic torch or hitting a group of them with a single area of effect pyromancy spell will cause their massive health bars to melt away instantly. This extreme weakness highlights the volatile composition of their flesh. They are composed entirely of dense fats, historical oils, and organic grease that have accumulated in the sewer pipes for hundreds of years. They are literal walking fatbergs, a monstrous mound of congealed tallow and industrial waste given a primitive form of life by the ambient magic of the curse. Beneath the filth of the depths and the pestilence of the gaping dragon lies the swamp of Blight Town. This place is infamous due to its sheer architectural absurdity. As you push through the heavy doors leading from the gaping dragon's arena, there is a fleeting hope for reprieve. You whisper a silent prayer that the next path might be less bleak than the sewers. But that hope is immediately extinguished when you see the rafters of Blight Town. Historically, this was a mining city, a place of industry, but the scaffoldings that remain are deeply unsettling. It is a chaotic lattice of wooden planks and rusted beams held together by nothing but decay. The sight of these rafters makes your stomach churn. There is something suffocating, grimy and filthy about these scaffoldings. The planks are old, rusted and dull. It looks like the grime of the swamp has climbed the walls, infecting the very texture of the wood until it looks saturated with filth. There is also something eerily wrong with the arrangement. In our world, we expect symmetry and structural intent from a pathway. Here, the geometry is jagged and nonsensical. These structures do not feel like bridges. We are told that the denizens of Blight Town built these scaffolds to seek safety and facilitate their descent. But you navigate these rafters with constant anxiety, only to find yourself falling face first into the black swamp below. Yet before we even reach the black swamp below, there is a sight of absolute horror. Located past the first bonfire, guarding a narrow tunnel that houses the power within pyromancy, is a creature that seems to exist outside the game's own rules. The parasitic wall hugger. It is a massive dark red insectoid mass fused to the cavern wall by 6 lethal claws. Its body is a bulbous sac covered in thin tentacle-like hairs that twitch as they feel the heavy stagnant air of the swamp. There is a jarring physical defiance in how it positions itself. It protrudes, jutting horizontally from the tunnel entrance and clinging to the walls. Also, the design hints at a lineage far more complex than a simple swamp mutation. While the common denizens of Blight Town are clearly victims of the filth and the pus, this entity feels like a chaos creation, a byproduct of the Witch of Izalith's failed flame. The deepest anomaly is hidden in the game's internal code. In the Japanese files, this creature is referred to as Prince Izalith. This suggests that the concept or design of this creature was tied to being a significant enemy or non-player character that was meant to be part of Izalith, but was discarded later on and left to be the wall hugger in Blight Town. This internal name opens up a terrifying door for theories. In the lore of Dark Souls, the Witch of Izalith had many daughters, but only one known son, the Ceaseless Discharge. He was deformed from birth, cursed with sores that leaked lava. But if the game files call the wall hugger Prince Izalith, it means there may have been another son, or perhaps this creature represents the final form of a forgotten prince. When the witch tried to duplicate the first flame, she created the twisted biological catastrophe known as the Chaos Flame. It did not just burn things, but rather, it melted and reshaped the flesh of anyone nearby into monstrous insect-like demons. Some players theorize that the parasitic wall hugger is actually the final stage in the life cycle of the Chaos Bug. The small Chaos Bugs you find later in the demon ruins are parasitic insects that burrow into mines and control their hosts. If a member of the royal family of Izalith was infected by one of these bugs during the disaster, a mutation would not stop at the head. Over centuries, the parasite in the prince's royal body would slowly merge into one single bloated organism. The prince's body grew larger, his limbs hardened into iron spikes, and his flesh turned into a massive blood-red sack. He became too heavy to walk or breathe normally, eventually migrating up the crust of the earth until he reached the walls of Blight Town. There, he hooked his claws deep into the stone, completely unable to move again, becoming a living piece of infrastructure. There is another deep theory that connects this quiet monster to one of the strange invaders you meet later in the game, Xanthus King Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a pyromancer trapped in the painted world of Ariamis. He is famous for wearing an incredibly massive yellow crown made of thick, bloodied cloth wrapped around his head. The shape of the wall hugger's bulbous body is almost identical to the silhouette of Jeremiah's massive head wraps. In the official concept art for the game, the cloth around Jeremiah's head is covered in wet bloodstains. The visual link suggests a horrifying idea. King Jeremiah might be wearing a cloth to hide a living, growing version of the exact same parasite that created the wall hugger. Jeremiah is a master of ancient pyromancies. And where do you find the wall hugger? It is permanently parked right on top of the power within spell. A pyromancy that increases your physical power at the cost of slowly burning away your own life force. Next to the monster, you also find a whip, which happens to be the exact signature weapon that King Jeremiah uses to fight you. These items are not placed there by accident. They tell us that the wall hugger has a direct historical connection to the ancient Xanthus pyromancers. The monster might be the son of King Jeremiah, a prince who used the volatile fire spells of Izalith until his body collapsed under the weight of a giant parasite. Jeremiah is one of the very few characters in the game whose helmet you can never remove. Even when you wear his armor set, the game refuses to let you see what is underneath the yellow cloth. The wall hugger shows us the answer. It shows us what happens when the parasite grows too large for the hat, bursting through the human body until it turns a member of royalty into a faceless, bloated tumor hanging from the ceiling of a mining slum. If you look closely at the upper walkways of Blight Town, you will meet the infested ghouls. These are the former residents of this once bustling mining city. Now, they are completely ruined, left behind to rot in deep despair. Their bodies show a terrifying physical deformity. Their backs are broken and twisted, forcing them to walk with a permanent heavy hunch. Their arms have stretched out into long, thin limbs that end in sharp, jagged claws. The skin across their bodies has been completely bleached, turning a sickly pink and purple color from centuries of exposure to toxic fumes and the acid of the swamp. They wear nothing but torn loincloths and dirty, worn-out skirts that look like they barely survived the passage of time. When you look into their faces, you see a complete absence of humanity. Their yellow eyes are so tiny and sunken into their skulls that they are almost invisible, leaving them with an eerie, hollow expression. They do not wander like natural animals. They stalk the wooden scaffoldings, staring into the dark until they catch the scent of fresh, undead flesh. The horror of the infested ghoul lies in how their broken minds still interact with tools. They are intelligent enough to use ladders to hunt you down across multiple floors, showing a dark, persistent drive. Some of these creatures still clutch basic infantry weapons like spears and swords. When they swing these blades at you, their attacks are incredibly slow and look completely lifeless. There is no pride or skill left in their movements. They are just repeating the basic muscle memory of their ancient training, swinging their arms because their brains are locked in a permanent state of defense. Even more disturbing are the variants that do not carry traditional weapons at all. Instead, they wield the stiff grey corpse of other humans, using the dead bodies of previous travelers as clubs to smash into your shield. The most terrifying part of the ghoul's behavior is its signature grab attack. Before it moves, the beast lets out a ferocious, blood-curdling roar that echoes through the wooden rafters. Then, it lunges forward with its long, distorted arms, trying to snatch your upper body with both hands. If it catches you, it forces your character to the ground, buries its face into your head, and begins to bite and chew repeatedly with a wild, frantic speed. The way it eats looks completely psychotic. It is not the clean bite of a predator killing for territory. It is the desperate movement of an entity that has been experiencing extreme painful starvation for hundreds of years. When they see you, their automated loop breaks for a split second, replaced by a deep, frantic panic to consume. They eat your face not to satisfy a biological need, but because their broken minds are trying to chew their way out of an eternal suffocating hunger. They are the tragic waste of an industrial society that was completely crushed by cosmic forces. Left to rot on unstable wooden planks, they scream like wild monsters because they have been emptied of every single thing that once made them human. Besides the ghouls, there is one more large entity that swarms the upper rafters and the marsh down below, and that is the infested barbarian. If you look closely at their physical model, their entire body reveals a story of extreme physical sickness. Their flesh is completely covered in a dark pitch black coloration. Large segments of their skin look heavily burnt, scarred, and ruined by the toxic environment. Just like the smaller ghouls, their spines are completely crooked and twisted, forcing them to carry their massive weight in a permanent hunch. Their faces are completely eradicated. The nose has been entirely removed or melted away, leaving a flat, smooth area of dark flesh right above a mouth full of jagged, broken teeth. The most striking visual features are their eyes. They glow with a bright, luminous red color. In the visual language of horror, these red eyes tells us that the creature has entered a state of total permanent frenzy. They no longer see humans as humans. Their minds are so broken that any living thing entering their territory is viewed as mere animal meat meant to be bludgeoned to death and eaten alive. There is a distinct tribal appearance to how these monsters are dressed, but these elements do not represent a living, healthy creature. Around their thick necks, they wear a crude necklace made of large, sharp white bones. They wear a similar belt around their waist, holding up a torn loincloth garment that is identical to the rags worn by the ghouls. These garments look old, worn, and rotted by time, looking like they have barely survived several centuries in the damp caves. These bone ornaments were likely added to their bodies after they underwent their terrible transformation. When the infection took hold, these large humans lost all their higher brain functions. They reverted to the most animalistic primal version of existence possible. They are extremely clumsy and slow-moving. They do not forge weapons or wear proper armor. Instead, the variants patrolling the upper entries wield massive raw tree branches as large clubs, while the larger variants standing in the deep mud near Quaylag's domain tirelessly hold massive boulders above their heads, ready to throw them at any traveler who approaches. They use pure brute force because their intelligence has completely dissolved, leaving them with only the most basic prehistoric methods of violence. The grossest detail about these giants is their item drops. The game files show that they have a massive 50% chance to drop a dung pie upon death. This detail suggests that the infested barbarians are completely covered in their own feces, mud, and the ambient rot of the swamp. They have become part of the sewage system itself. On Reddit, players frequently joke about this drop, calling them turd sandwiches and using them as a meme. But within the actual logic of the world, this item holds a deep mechanical purpose. Using a dung pie inflicts the toxic status effect on your opponent, but it also inflicts a lesser version of the toxin on your own character, which can be used strategically to block out the much deadlier toxic darts fired by the hidden snipers in the rafters. This interaction shows us just how hostile Blight Town is. The only way to survive the poison of the environment is to cover your own body in the toxic waste of the monsters who live there. When you engage an infested barbarian in combat, they will occasionally pause their slow attacks to throw their head back and let out a loud echoing roar. This animation leaves them completely vulnerable to backstabs and easy parries. Many players on communities like r/Dark Souls note that because their attack windups are so slow and sluggish, the easiest way to kill them is to simply walk around their sides or parry their large clubs with a small shield. But their roar is not just a meaningless sound effect. It rather functions as an alarm to draw in other close-by enemies to join the fight. Because they are so clumsy and massive, they cannot navigate the ladders of the scaffolding, allowing you to easily separate them by running up the wooden platforms. They stand at the bottom of the structure, staring up with their blind, flat faces, repeating their roars into the open air. In the deep, stagnant swamp at the bottom of Blight Town, the creators of Dark Souls took this universal human fear and magnified it into a giant version. Mechanically, these giant mosquitoes are among the weakest organisms in the entire game. They have incredibly low health balls and can usually be killed with a single strike from almost any weapon or even a basic throwing knife. But their physical appearance is incredibly gross and eerie. They fly through the green miasma of the swamp, tracking your character from extreme distances. They represent the absolute breakdown of natural boundaries, where a minor household pest grows to the size of a hunting dog. The creature's body is split into a heavy, segmented torso and a massive lower abdomen. The most disturbing feature on this model is the giant bulbous sac at the very rear of its body. This sac glows with a sickly metallic silver and red coloration, looking like a piece of raw metal or a blister that is ready to burst. This sac is entirely full of corrupted blood that the insect has harvested from the infected ghouls, the barbarians, and the thousands of undead corpses rotting in the mud below. The insect handles this stolen fluid in a deeply unsettling way. When it gets close to your character, it does not just try to bite you. It uses its internal muscle to squeeze that bulbous sac, spraying a cloud of toxic red blood into the open air as a short-range projectile. There is a profound irony in how the giant mosquitoes function within the hierarchy of Lordran. The grand fortresses above were built by mighty gods who wielded lightning bolts and wore golden armor. Yet those great civilizations collapsed into history, leaving their massive stone cities to be inherited by hollowed outcasts. And down below those outcasts, at the absolute bottom of the world, these tiny one-shottable insects have become the true apex predators of the waste. At the furthest edge of the Blight Town swamp, completely opposite from Quelaag's domain, the environment descends into a flat, quiet wasteland of mud. In this specific area, surrounding the giant roots of the tree that leads into the Great Hollow, you will find the giant leeches. The giant leeches in Blight Town are massive slug-like cylinders of meat that are nearly the size of a human torso. They slide through the toxic sludge with a slow, heavy rhythm. Mechanically, they are not highly aggressive or dangerous. They have low health balls, and many of them are completely passive, sitting completely still among the lily pads until you step directly into their striking range. But their physical design is incredibly gross. When you look at the physical features of the giant leech, the texture of its skin reveals a deep story of environmental contamination. The body is shaped like a thick, elongated teardrop that tapers into a narrow tail at the rear. The skin is split into hundreds of tight horizontal ridges that contract and expand to push the creature forward through the mud. The coloration is a filthy mix of dark bronze, deep brown, and pale yellow, completely coated in a thick, wet layer of mucus that catches the sickly light of the cave. There are visible red stains running along its back, looking like fresh blood or raw inflammation, where the toxic chemical compounds of the swamp have irritated its soft tissue. The creature has absolutely no eyes, no face, and no recognizable sensory organs on its front end. It is a completely blind tube of flesh that navigates through pure vibrations in the slime. When it decides to attack, it uses its entire body weight as a blunt instrument, executing a slow head smash or a sudden jumping head smash, where it launches its wet mass directly at your shield. The most fascinating and strange aspect of the giant leech is not its passive behavior, but its unique item drops. These creatures are farmed heavily by players because they have a reliable 5% chance to drop a large titanite shard or a bundle of 5 green titanite shards. Within the economy of Lordran, titanite is a legendary sacred mineral used exclusively by blacksmiths to reinforce weapons and armor. It is described as a fragment of an ancient slab used to forge the armament of the gods. This creates a massive lore contradiction. Why do these mindless slimy parasites living at the bottom of a filthy human dump carry the rare materials of divine blacksmithing inside their bodies? The answer lies in the position of the leeches within the ecosystem of the world. Blight Town sits directly underneath the depths, which sits directly underneath the undead berg. For hundreds of years, the human civilizations above have been breaking down, throwing their broken weapons, ruined iron armor, and industrial waste down into the sewer gates. All of that metal debris washed down into the lowest mud of the swamp, where it began to dissolve and rot. The giant leeches are the ultimate bottom feeders of this cycle. They slide through the deep mud, swallowing everything in their path. Their bodies are designed to process raw filth, and over centuries, their internal digestive systems began to isolate the heavy mineral deposits from the melted weapons above. They do not use the titanite to build shells or weapons. Their soft bodies simply cannot digest the divine stone. The titanite shards crystallize inside their stomach like kidney stones, sitting in their wet interiors as useless ballast. The leeches are living organic refineries. They take the discarded military history of the upper world and condense it into pure upgrade material, turning the lowest parasite of the mud into the primary source of strength for any warrior looking to upgrade their blade. As you explore the dark ruin or a hidden room, you spot a sturdy weapon chest resting against the wall. After hours of tense survival, excitement wells up inside you. Your instinct to gather wealth drives you forward, making you rush to lift the lid. But the moment your fingers touch the latch, the container undergoes a horrific physical transformation. The wooden lid swings wide, revealing a long, wet purple tongue and deep rows of sharp teeth made entirely of human finger bones. Mechanically, if you trigger this trap by opening the chest, the mimic executes a special high-damaging grab attack called Mimic's Meal, stuffing your character headfirst into its wooden mouth and chewing repeatedly until your health bar drops to 0. If you strike the container before opening it, the mimic stands completely upright, rising to a head that towers over an armored knight. It is fast, highly aggressive, and deals massive physical damage using a rapid running kick and wide arm swings. You can determine the true nature of any chest before touching it by looking at 2 subtle visual cues. A true chest has its right side chain wrapped into a neat, tight circle, while a mimic's chain is straightened out, reaching forward like a snake. Furthermore, if you turn off your torch and water a fake chest in total silence, you can see the entire wooden structure perform a long, slow breath once every 17 seconds, with the lid slightly rising and falling as the lungs inside pull in the stale air. The true history of these monsters is revealed in the item description for the symbol of avarice, the rare headgear they drop upon death. Monster head resembling a treasure chest. Once an ancient god, it is said this is the symbol of shame imposed on a long-lost clan, exiled for the sin of avarice. This description reveals a tragic fall from grace. The ancestors of the mimics were originally part of the elite clan of the gods in Anor Londo. They lived in luxury, but they eventually committed the ultimate sin of absolute greed, hoarding immense piles of wealth and refusing to share the resources of the earth. To punish this selfishness, the higher authorities did not simply lock them in a cell. They branded the sin directly into their biology, reshaping their physical bodies to look exactly like the objects they coveted. Their heads were permanently transformed into heavy wooden boxes, turning their faces into a locked lid and their fingers into the teeth that guard the lock. They were banished from the sunlit palaces and scattered across the world, forced to spend eternity sitting in dark corners as a physical warning to others. They became living traps, mimicking the shape of reward to punish any adventurer who allows reckless greed to cloud their judgment. While the gods officially call this transformation a divine punishment, a deeper theory within the community suggests that the mutation was caused directly by the internal mechanics of the bottomless box. In the lore, traveling undead heavily rely on these magical boxes to store massive amounts of armor, weapons, and heavy cargo that would otherwise crush their physical carrying capacity. The box works by holding materials inside a small pocket of distorted space, but within the logic of Dark Souls, strong, unchecked human emotions have the power to physically warp reality and reshape flesh. We see this happen to the gaping dragon, whose insatiable hunger turned its entire ribcage into a giant mouth, and to the crow demons of Ariamis, whose religious obsession sprouted feathers from their skin. Because mimics are scattered across high-security areas like the Duke's Archives, Anor Londo, and Sen's Fortress, they function as an additional security measure that comes next to the main line of defense, which are the traps and the enemies which attack you. They are placed next to powerful items like the Lightning Spear and the Crystal Halberd, ensuring that any thief who breaks into the palace is immediately executed by the treasure itself. This placement creates a state of permanent paranoia for the player. Once you are bitten by your first mimic in Sen's Fortress, the feeling of safety around any chest is permanently destroyed. Every chest you find for the rest of your journey is viewed with deep suspicion and fear. You no longer walk up to a reward with joy. Instead, you approach it with a weapon drawn, striking the wooden frame with a heavy blade or throwing Lloyd's talisman at the lock to see if the box will sleep or try to bite your head off. But as we pull back from the violent frenzies of Lordran's monsters, from the armored cruelty of the Fangbores, the toxic depths of the slimes, and the deceptive jaws of the mimics, we realize that these physical abominations are only half of the tragedy. The true horror sometimes happens to the people who look just like you, desperately clinging to the last threads of their sanity while the world quietly fades around them. To understand the ultimate cruelty of this world, we have to look past the beasts we slaughter and listen instead to the fading whispers of those we try to save. Close your eyes. Let the ambient warmth of the bonfire settle in. Welcome to 1 hour of disturbing Dark Souls lore to fall asleep to.